The street was dark, no streetlights past the last intersection, and the trees were pressing in on both sides, and my sneakers were loud on the pavement, and I hated walking alone at night because my brain turned every shadow into a person. Footsteps behind me. My hand went to my phone, and my thumb found my mom's name in my contacts. "Call me if anything feels wrong," she'd said on my way out the door. The footsteps got faster. I spun around, and Kenzie grabbed my shoulders, and I screamed so loud a porch light came on across the street. "Relax, it's me!" She was laughing so hard she bent double. "You walk so fast, I had to sprint." I shoved her, and my heart was still hammering, but I was laughing too. She linked her arm through mine and pulled me up Avery's driveway. "Come on, we're late. Truth or dare?" Avery pointed across the circle at Carter, and the basement went dead quiet. 10 of us crammed onto couch cushions with no parents home. Kenzie dropped onto the cushion next to me and bumped my shoulder. "This is gonna be the best night of our lives." She pulled her hair into a ponytail and knotted a friendship bracelet around my wrist. She'd been knotting me a new one every month since 6th grade, purple and gold thread that she'd tied with her teeth. She held up her arm and bumped it against mine. "Now we match." Before we started, a kid from the lacrosse team made a crack about my shoes being off-brand. Kenzie stood up. "Her shoes are cooler than anything in your closet. Sit down." The kid shut up, and Kenzie dropped back onto her cushion like she'd swatted a fly. She always dug through the Starburst bag and pulled out every orange one and dropped them into my palm because she knew they were my favorite. 6 years of that kind of fierce love. When Brody and I broke up, she held me on her bedroom floor while I sobbed for 2 hours. She said, "He didn't deserve you," and I grabbed fistfuls of her sweatshirt and believed every word. My head found her shoulder. Carter picked truth without hesitating. "Who's the worst kisser in this room?" He pointed at Brody without hesitating. The room exploded. Brody launched a pillow at his head, and everyone was shoving each other and laughing. Colton picked dare and had to chug a glass of hot sauce and milk. He held the glass up like a trophy. For glory, he chugged it. His face turned purple and he sprinted to the sink. Colton once ate a worm at a track meet because somebody dared him and threw up on the finish line and still came in third. He bowed when the chanting stopped and everybody clapped. Mia dared Harper to do her best principal impression. Harper hitched her pants to her chest and deepened her voice. "Students, the cafeteria meatloaf is not a weapon." The room fell apart. Everyone was doubled over, crying, laughing. Kenzie grabbed my arm, shaking with laughter against my shoulder. The warmth of her hand spread through my chest, and I leaned back, feeling like nothing bad could happen with Kenzie next to me. I pulled out my phone and Snapchatted the chaos. Colton's purple face and the circle of cushions. Through the skylight above the basement, I could see stars and the edge of the roof. My fingernails were already chipped from gripping the cushion too hard. I captioned it, "Best night ever." My ex-boyfriend Brody walked down the basement stairs, and my stomach dropped. Kenzie saw my face and leaned into my ear. "Ignore him. He's irrelevant." She said it loud enough for him to hear, and Brody's jaw tightened, and he dropped onto a cushion on the opposite side of the circle. Then I caught Kenzie glancing at him when she thought I wasn't looking. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. He stretched, and his shirt rode up. She stared at the strip of skin above his belt for a half second. Then she caught me noticing and smiled too fast. The sick dread prickled up my neck, but I shook it off because she drove 40 minutes to bring me soup when I had mono. She would never do that to me. I shook my head and turned back to the game. Kenzie leaned into Avery and whispered something, and Avery pointed at Foster. "Dare, ring the neighbor's doorbell and run." Foster sprinted across the yard and hammered the bell. The porch light snapped on. He vaulted the fence so fast he left a shoe behind, and the dog went berserk. Harper got dared to steal from the gas station and came back 4 minutes later with chips stuffed in her jacket and her hands shaking. The laughter had dried up. Mia leaned over to me. "These dares are getting kind of intense." I nodded, but the game was already rolling and nobody wanted to be the one to stop it. Kenzie leaned into Avery and whispered. He pointed straight at me. "Truth or dare?" "Dare. Go into the utility room under the stairs. Lights off. 5 minutes." I'd been afraid of the dark since I was 8, and only 2 people in this room knew that. Kenzie and Brody were frozen. I shoved the door shut and the dark swallowed me. The water heater clicked on. Something brushed my arm. I screamed and crashed into the shelf. Cans rained down on my head, and the panic was so total I couldn't breathe. I pressed against the wall and grabbed the friendship bracelet on my wrist. I held on and counted seconds with my eyes squeezed shut. Kenzie made it for me. Kenzie was my person. When I came out 5 minutes later, my shirt was soaked with sweat and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Kenzie slid over and draped her arm around my shoulders. "You okay? That was intense." She rubbed my shoulder. Her voice was soft, and I leaned into her because she felt solid and warm. "I hate that they did that to you," she said. She had picked that dare. She had whispered it to Avery and sat there for 5 5 minutes listening to me scream through the door, and now she was rubbing my shoulder. So I leaned into my best friend and said, "I'm fine." Harper pulled Avery aside by the kitchen. I could hear her through the doorway. "These are getting too rough." Avery shrugged and kept going. "Everyone's having fun." Kenzie appeared behind him. "Relax, Harper. We're just playing." She steered him back to the circle. Mia picked Truth next. "What's the worst rumor you've heard about someone in this room?" She chewed her lip and glanced at me and then at Kenzie. Kenzie told half the volleyball team that Nora only made varsity because the coach felt sorry for her. The room went quiet. I shoved off my cushion, and the fury hit so fast my face went hot. "You said what?" Kenzie threw her hands up. "It was a joke." "Was it funny?" She didn't answer. Brody put his hand on Kenzie's shoulder, and she leaned into it for half a second before pulling away. I caught the whole thing. I grabbed Mia's arm after the round. "Did you see that? Brody's hand on her shoulder?" Mia squinted across the room. "I mean, they were just sitting close." She leaned into him. That could be anything. I couldn't prove it. A half-second touch and a lean. I dug my nails into my palm because none of it was proof. Colton got dared to jump off the pool house roof into the deep end, 12 feet above the water, and the edge was slick. He climbed up and his face was green. He jumped and his foot caught the edge and he hit the water sideways and didn't come up. 3 seconds. 5. The whole patio was frozen. Harper grabbed my arm hard. "Somebody do something." The friendship bracelet caught on my watch band as I kicked off my shoes and dove in. The cold hit me like concrete. I grabbed Colton under the arms and dragged him up coughing blood. I hauled him to the edge and he rolled onto the concrete and threw up pool water. His lip was split open and his hands were shaking. Colton grabbed my arm from the ground. "Thank you." His voice was trembling. Crouching next to him, I squeezed his shoulder. "You okay?" My ears are ringing. For a second, it was just us on the concrete while the party buzzed around us. "I thought I was gonna die," he said quietly. "You weren't. I had you. You jumped in before I even went under all the way. You would have done the same." He shook his head. "I don't think I would have. I think I would have frozen like everyone else." He squeezed my arm. His lip was bleeding onto my hand. We were both soaking wet, and Colton had no idea the game was rigged against both of us. Kenzie was standing 10 feet away with her arms crossed. "He's fine." Colton could have drowned 10 feet from her, and she hadn't moved a muscle. Mia grabbed Avery's arm. "We need to stop. Someone's going to get seriously hurt." Harper nodded. "This is insane. He just hit his head." Avery looked at Kenzie. Kenzie shook her head once. Almost invisible, but I caught it. But I caught the whole thing. The same way she'd been shaking her head and nodding all night. Avery shrugged and kept going. "Colton's fine. Let's keep going." 2 people wanted to stop. I was soaking wet and bleeding from pulling Colton out. The suspicion that had been building all night hardened into something cold and certain. I pulled Mia aside near the back door. "Every hard dare tonight has been aimed at me. The dark room. Now this." Mia's eyes went wide. "You think Kenzie's picking them?" She whispers to Avery before every single one. "That could be coincidence. My best friend knows I'm afraid of the dark. The next dare put me in a pitch black room. That's not coincidence." Mia chewed her lip. "What are you going to do?" "I need to catch her." I stepped out the back door and pressed my palms against the cold patio railing. The pool was still and dark, with Colton's blood dissolving in a faint pink cloud near the edge. Inside, I could hear the game continuing. A muffled laugh through the glass, a groan. Through the skylight above, I could see the edge of the roof against the stars. My fingers were already sore from the fence and the pool and everything else tonight. Colton's blood was dissolving in the pool 10 feet away, and the game was still going. I went back inside. Kenzie was whispering to Avery again with her ponytail swinging. My next dare, the Hendersons' backyard, their Rottweiler. I climbed the fence and the motion light clicked on. The dog came around the corner at a full sprint. I grabbed the flag and threw myself back over and landed on my shoulder on the sidewalk. The dog slammed into the chain link behind me. I limped back into the basement holding the flag and dropped it on the floor. Foster grabbed his jacket. "I'm out. This is way too far." Brody blocked the bottom of the stairs. "You leave now. We pick your punishment. Those are the rules." Foster looked around the room. Nobody backed him up. He dropped his jacket and sat back down. Kenzie leaned into Avery and whispered. He pointed straight at me. Again. "Dare. Climb onto the roof and hang from the gutter for a count of 10. The gutter was 2 stories over concrete. Mia shot to her feet. "No, absolutely not. This is too far." She stepped into the center of the circle and spread her arms. "Someone almost drowned an hour ago. His blood is still in the pool. You want her to hang off a roof?" Harper stood up and grabbed Avery's arm. "This has to stop. Right now." The room split. Half the room was on their feet. The other half were looking at Kenzie because Kenzie had been been running this game all night whether they knew it or not. Kenzie shrugged from her cushion. It's just 10 seconds. It's 20 feet over concrete. Mia was shaking and her voice cracked. Avery pulled his arm free from Harper. The rules are the rules. It's 20 feet over concrete. Mia was shaking. She turned to me. You don't have to do this. Kenzie was picking at her shoelace. Her face was blank. My best friend of 6 years was going to let me climb onto a roof over concrete without saying a word. The fury burned through me because every dare aimed at me came from that corner. The dark room, the dog, now this. Fine. I climbed the trellis. The wood groaned. I pulled myself onto the garage roof and then up the slope. The wind pulled at my shirt and the concrete was directly below. I swung my legs over and lowered myself until I was hanging by my fingers. The cold, wet metal bit into my fingers. 1, 2, 3. My arms were burning. 4, 5. My left hand slipped. I dropped 2 inches and caught myself with 3 fingers. A scream ripped out of me. 6, 7. I kicked my feet and found the window frame and braced my toes. 8, 9, 10. I threw myself onto the roof slope and rolled and lay flat on the shingles, pressing my palms against the warm grit. The quiet wrapped around me. The party hummed below me, but it sounded distant and wrong. The sky was enormous and full of stars. I pressed my whole body flat against the shingles, just breathing. I almost closed my eyes and stayed, but I pressed my face against the skylight glass. The basement glowed below me. Kenzie and Brody were pressed together in the corner by the bookshelf. His hand was on her hip. She was leaning into him, and his thumb was tracing circles on her waist, and they looked like 2 people who had been touching each other for a long time. Kenzie pulled away and walked to Avery. I could see her mouth moving. She held up 3 fingers, and every finger pointed at my empty cushion, planning the next one while I bled 20 feet above their heads. The dark room, the dog, the roof, every dare aimed at me. I had my proof. The dark room for my fear of the dark, the dog for being alone, the roof for the heights. She'd used everything she knew about me to break me, and while I almost died, she was in the corner with her hand on my ex-boyfriend's chest. 3 weeks ago, she held me while I cried about him and said, "He didn't deserve you," and she was already with him. I climbed down the trellis so fast, I ripped 2 fingernails on the wood and dropped onto the grass. The fury burned away every ounce of fear and every ounce of grief. Nothing was left but the cold, clear knowledge that I was going to walk into that basement and end this. I shoved through the basement door and dropped onto my cushion, and the room went quiet because my hands were bleeding and my face was filthy, and the fury was radiating off me so hot the air felt different. Mia was crouching next to Colton, holding ice against his split lip. Harper was texting on her phone. I just texted Avery's parents. They're 20 minutes away. 20 minutes. Colton. 20 minutes, and there's broken glass and blood on the pool deck. The clock was running. Truth. Avery blinked. You don't want to dare? Truth. Who do you trust the least in this room? I pointed at Kenzie, then at Brody. Both of them. Kenzie's face went white. You 2 have been running this game all night. Every dare aimed at me came from Kenzie whispering to Avery. I kicked the bottle across the circle so hard it shattered against the wall. The dark room was for me because I hate the dark. The roof was for me because you knew I was afraid. And while I was hanging off that gutter, you were in the corner with his hand on your hip. The horror rippled through the room. Colton stood up slowly. His lip was swollen and the cut had scabbed over, and he was shaking. She pulled me out of the water tonight. I hit the edge and nobody moved except her. He pointed at Kenzie. You were standing right there. You said, "He's fine." And when Mia tried to stop the game, you shook your head and Avery kept going. Foster stepped forward. I saw them through the sliding door too. When Nora was on the roof, they were standing real close. Harper nodded. Kenzie whispered to Avery before every single dare. The room turned like dominoes. Avery backed against the wall. I didn't know. She told me the dares would be funny. Kenzie shoved him. Shut up. Don't push him because he's telling the truth. I was in her face and she stumbled backward into the couch. You used every person in this room. I swept my arm across the circle. You used Avery as a puppet. You turned a game into a weapon. And when 2 people tried to stop it because Colton was bleeding, you overruled them with a head shake because you weren't done with me yet. Brody spoke from the floor. For what it's worth, I told her to just tell you. I spun toward him. You were standing in the corner with your hand on her hip while I was hanging off a roof. You didn't think the girl you dated for a year would care that you were with her best friend? He dropped his chin to his chest, and the guilt was written across every inch of him. Brody tried to push past Foster. Foster grabbed his shirt and shoved him back, and Brody tripped over a cushion and went down hard. How long? 2 months, Kenzie whispered. word, Kenzie scrambled to her feet. This isn't fair. Everyone was picking dares. I didn't force anyone. You forced me. I stepped toward her and she backed up. You designed every dare around my worst fears. You used your knowledge of me as a weapon, and you let me almost die so you wouldn't have to admit you were sleeping with my ex. She sank back onto the cushion like I'd knocked her legs out. Every time I was scared tonight. Every time I was in that dark room counting seconds. Every time I was hanging off that gutter wondering if I was going to fall. You were watching, and you didn't say stop. Not once. She crumpled onto the cushion. Her ponytail had fallen apart, and her hair was stuck to her wet face, and she looked nothing like the girl who'd braided friendship bracelets in the car. Why the game? Why not just tell me? Because I knew you'd hate me, and you're the only person who's ever actually liked me. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. I was going to tell you. I kept trying to figure out how, and every time I started, I could see your face when you cried about him on my floor, and I couldn't do it. So I just kept lying. She pressed her palms against her eyes. And then the lie got so big, the only way to keep it was to make sure you never asked the right question. So I made sure you were too scared or too embarrassed to think straight. The devastation and fury tangled so tight in my chest, I couldn't separate them because she'd rather shove me off a roof than look me in the eye. Headlights swept across the basement windows. Avery's parents. The clock had run out. A car door slammed in the driveway. Avery's face went gray. Everyone out the back, now! The room scrambled. People grabbing jackets, shoving shoes on, Harper kicking cushions under the couch to hide the circle. Avery sprinted upstairs to unlock the front door. The basement emptied in 30 seconds. Broken glass from the bottle, water stains from my soaking clothes, Colton's blood on the pool deck outside. Kenzie scrambled after me as I headed for the stairs. Her ponytail was gone, and she looked nothing like the girl who'd tied that bracelet on my wrist 3 hours ago. She grabbed my wrist. Nora, please. I peeled her fingers off one by one, and the grief almost cracked me open, but I held it together. You could have told me the truth 3 months ago. You chose this. Harper followed me out, then Colton, then Marco, then Foster. Mia caught me at the top of the stairs. I should have told you about the volleyball thing sooner. Why didn't you? Because Kenzie is scary when she wants to be. She hugged me, and the fierceness of her grip surprised me. Harper was waiting by her car. Colton was leaning against the trunk, and he'd put his jacket over Mia's shoulders because it was cold and she was shivering. 4 of us in Avery's driveway who hadn't been friends 3 hours ago. Colton had his jacket on Mia. Harper had her arm through mine. We were standing together like people who'd survived the same wreck. Colton bumped my shoulder. Thanks for the pool thing. His voice was thick, and the gratitude made my throat ache. You stood up in there too. You didn't have to. You jumped into a pool for me. Standing up in a basement was the least I could do. He pulled the ice pack off his lip and looked at it. You know what the worst part is? I actually had fun before it went wrong. The hot sauce thing. The impressions. That was real. Yeah, some of it was real. He put the ice back. That makes it worse, right? Yeah, it does. I posted one thing on Snapchat from the passenger seat of Harper's car. A photo of my torn up hands on the dashboard. No caption. Kenzie would see it and know what it meant. Harper drove in silence. You know what the scariest dare was tonight? What? Walking back into that basement with bleeding hands and saying truth. She dropped me at my house. My mom was asleep on the couch with her phone on her chest. She'd left the porch light on. I sank onto the cushion next to her, and she opened one eye. Fun party? I held up my torn fingernails and my dirty hands. The friendship bracelet was still there, soaked in pool water and stained with blood from the gutter. Not really. She sat up and saw my hands and grabbed them and turned them over. What happened? Truth or dare? Oh, honey. She went to the bathroom and came back with band-aids and peroxide. She cleaned every cut and wrapped every finger. When she got to the bracelet, she paused. This is new. Kenzie made it. It's pretty. Yeah. Do you want me to cut it off? I turned the bracelet on my wrist. Purple and gold thread that she'd tied with her teeth. Kenzie had tied the knot with her teeth in the car and said, "Now we match." The thread was soaked in pool water from saving Colton and stained with blood from the gutter. It smelled like chlorine and the worst night of my life. No, Mom wrapped the bandage around my finger next to it and didn't ask why my voice cracked on Kenzie's name. The bracelet sat on my wrist next to the white bandage, and Kenzie's voice echoed in my head. You're the only person who's ever actually liked me. The tears I'd been holding since the roof finally fell. I cried into her shoulder, and she held me. She didn't ask what happened because she knew I'd tell her when I was ready. Through the window, I could see the roof of the house next door. The view from up there was the truest thing that happened all night. People only show you who they really are when they think you can't see them.